Microsoft created a platform, a set of APIs, a set of capabilities to tightly integrate Teams and leverage some of the power Microsoft have in Teams, in the underlying infrastructure, in Azure, in AI, to build not just kind of traditional contact center experiences, but brand new types of contact center experiences in tightly working alongside Teams.
Welcome to Always On CXCX, the show for contact center and IT leaders. Between helping support your contact center reps, your customers, and the tech that makes the contact center function, you're relied upon quite a lot. You can't afford for your customer experience, employee experience, or stability of the contact center to falter. If you're ready to find the next strategy to keep your customer and employee experience always on, let's get into this episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Always On CXCX. Today, we have Tom Arbuthnot and Gidi Adlersberg on the show. They're joining us today to chat about Microsoft Teams contact centers, Teams phone extensibility, the Unify integration model, and how they all tie in together with Azure Communication Services. So
there's a lot of terminology right on the intro.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tom, Unify. What's Unify?
A lot to jump into. But let's get into the conversation. Tom and Gidi, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Looking forward to this one. It's an exciting time for contact center and Teams phone extensibility and everything's going on, so it should be a good chat.
Yeah,
absolutely. A lot going on in that front. Yeah, very pleased myself.
I love it. Well, Tom, let's kick it off with you. You are a Microsoft MVP expert on Teams. Could you help us break down what Teams phone extensibility means in the context of the contact center?
Yeah, sure. So Microsoft first announced this at Enterprise Connect as Teams phone extensibility, but they've been working on it for a few years. And essentially, Teams phone extensibility is a way for initially contact centers to very tightly integrate Teams. So they're leveraging the same underlying infrastructure that Teams runs on, which is Azure Communication Services, which I think we'll get into. What it means is Microsoft created a platform, a set of APIs, a set of capabilities for ISVs like AudioCodes, who are one of the early ones doing this, to tightly integrate Teams and leverage some of the power Microsoft have in Teams, in the underlying infrastructure, in Azure, in AI, to build not just traditional contact center experiences, but brand new types of contact center experiences in tightly working alongside Teams.
I love it. Gidi, anything from your perspective on Teams phone extensibility? I know us as integrated service vendor, maybe you could touch on it from your perspective.
Yeah, so Teams phone extensibility is really, just like Tom said, it's Microsoft's kind of project of making the kind of the connection between Azure Communication Services to Teams phone a much more official, standardized method of connecting, by the way, any third-party application to Teams phone, and namely contact center. So, when you think about different kinds of third-party applications that could bring value on top of Teams phone, of course, it's natural to think of a contact center as one of the more obvious, if not the most obvious one. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been inspired by multiple vendors, including us, who have seen the potential of that marriage, let's call it, of that coupling between the Azure Communication Services stack and the resiliency and spread of Microsoft Teams phone.
Yeah, you touched on a good point there, Gidi, which is it's a weird name, isn't it? Teams phone extensibility. And then we talk immediately about contact center. But obviously, exactly. I was actually out with Microsoft last week and we were talking about this. Like, it's Teams phone extensibility because they anticipate other future scenarios that use this tight integration. And I don't want to jump the gun on your next question, Josh, but there's a specific contact center certification which brings it into the contact center world.
Yeah,
exactly.
Let's get into that, because they announced Microsoft announced Teams phone extensibility, and then not long after that, they announced the Unify integration model.
Because why explain it all at once? It's best to spread out explanations, I find.
2 announcements, twice the hype. But obviously, there's a lot of buzz around that, especially when it comes to the Microsoft Teams contact center space. But could you explain what that model is and what it is in comparison to Teams phone extensibility?
This is important to understand. So Teams phone extensibility is essentially the technology and the capability to do it. And then Unify is the name for the certification that the ISV solutions will go and get certified by to get the rubber stamp with Microsoft to say they're doing everything the right way, they're a great partner, etc. And we have 3 certifications in the contact center world for Microsoft: Connect, which is a SIP trunk, Extend, which is the graph APIs, and then Unify, which is the ACS-driven Teams phone extensibility. And of those three, Unify is Microsoft's like premier. This is going to be the best option. It's also the option that the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Contact Center team are using for their integration to Teams. And obviously, that's a big bet for Microsoft. So it's really exciting that Microsoft are doing it first party, but they're allowing the third party partners to have exactly the same access, exactly the same capabilities, exactly the same power. So that's Unify. So your vendor will be using Teams Phone Extensibility as a technology platform, but the certification you're looking for is the Unify certification.
Yeah, and just for
And
the sake of the audience that's been listening to this show for quite some time, the term Unify is pretty new, right? So maybe a word on that. That for many years, if you went to the that big, good old famous documentation page in Microsoft Learn, which specifies the different contact center vendors who are certified for Teams for the past, what is it, Tom? 3, 4
Two
years?
years, yeah, definitely more than two, isn't it? It's,
Yeah. You used to see connect, extend, and then power. They used to call it the power model. And here in Always On, we've been talking quite a lot on power model, the benefits of it, but we were always, waiting for it to be officially announced. And now with Teams Phone Extensibility out, right before the certification criteria became generally available for vendors to try to become certified, Microsoft went and said, you know what, for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, we called it power model, but actually we now kind of realize we actually want to call it Unify, which, I mean, it's a change of term, but uh, uh, in my view, at least, it's a good change. It's the word Unify encapsulates a lot of Microsoft's vision.
I agree. You're right. Actually, it's a better name, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
actually, you are very tightly integrated to the point where you're running on one integrated platform. And I don't know, we'll get into some more of the technology, but one of the big things is the ability to bring your Teams phone numbers through to the contact center seamlessly. So you can manage all your contact numbers through direct routing, calling plan, Azure Operator Connect, and route them seamlessly through to the contact center. So it really is unified in the sense of you're managing it all on one platform.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked for so long about UCAS and CCAS consolidation. So Unify is just a great, title that catches that significance and
Yeah.
puts it in an official integration model. So yeah.
Tom, you mentioned some of the other certifications, and those are Connect and Extend, and now we obviously have Unify. Is there any time a customer would choose a vendor that is using the Connect or Extend certification now that Unify is the premier option?
Yeah, good question. As always, consulting answer, it depends on the customer requirements. If someone talks to me about it, and I do get to have this conversation quite a lot, all things being even, if you're really betting on Teams and you're tightly working with Teams, then the more integrated product is generally the better product from a user experience point of view. So I typically see like we've got a bit of Teams and a bit of contact center, and sometimes we want to work together. And as you go up that stack, you get tighter and tighter in terms of the integration. And it's one of the starting points of the conversation, because then you need to assess the solution, because just because they're Connect or Extend or Unify doesn't mean they have identical feature sets. In fact, very much not. They're very different. So it's a clear flag. I think the bigger thing to understand is Microsoft, when they announced this, they put 6 of their kind of first partners on stage. And that's a testament to who's working really tightly with Microsoft, who got the inside track on the conversation, who's going to be first to certify. So as a customer, when I'm talking about vendor selection, I always talk about you're betting on a partner for a long term here, who's been around for a while, who's tightly integrated with Microsoft, who's in it for the long haul. And that's another way to see who's placing a serious bet on this. And obviously, as we said, AudioCodes, one of those ones that initially, and Gidi and I have been talking about this for a few years now, like I have been working on this platform for quite a while. I have quite a good insight as to how it all hangs together and what some of the capabilities are.
Definitely. I love it. Gidi, let's jump to you. We've talked a little bit about this, but Azure Communication Services plays a very pivotal role in enabling Teams phone extensibility. How does ACS enhance Teams phone experience, and maybe what are some practical examples you have of this in action for contact centers.
Before we talk about actual outcomes of this method of integration, I think it's worth to zoom in a bit on what is this connection exactly between Azure Communication Services and Teams Phone. And Tom touched on it a bit in the beginning, and we've also touched it in previous conversations, where those of you in the audience that are technical enough or enough of Microsoft geeks out there, you probably know what is Microsoft IC3. If you don't, you can just go ahead and Google it. But basically, Microsoft IC3, in simple words, it's the media layer for Microsoft Teams. So the voice and the video are all carried on Microsoft IC3. Now, guess who built IC3 and maintains it until today? It's Azure Communication Services. So the way that I like to think about it is from a infrastructure, from a media handling, from an architecture standpoint, Azure Communication Services is really the engine under Teams Phone. Now, with Teams Phone Extensibility, we're kind of taking this engine with the vehicle of Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Teams Phone and wrapping it up all together to one kind of, again, standardized kind of experience. So when you think about, the difference between that to connect or extend, you're really talking about the difference between bringing an interaction that originated outside of Teams, outside of Azure, into Teams, versus in the Teams Phone Extensibility case, the call actually, everything originates in Teams. Everything is Azure, completely Azure native, Teams native. So, and maybe if we want to be a bit more concrete about it, it's namely using that SDK from Azure Communication Services, known as the calling SDK, which essentially gives ISVs such as us a way to almost build, the way that I like to say it, it's almost building another Teams client that just fits our application needs. But from an architectural standpoint, from a topology standpoint, our agent desktop application that uses the calling SDK from ACS behaves exactly like a Teams client when it comes to delivering the interaction to the agent and to the calling customer. So really, it's about just taking the integration level and the coupling of contact center and Teams Phone to the highest degree. When you talk about an SDK approach versus API, or let alone a C-based integration, there's far less, let's say like that, there's far less that can go wrong when you use an SDK where Microsoft kind of made sure, that's how it needs to work. You just develop on top of that.
Yeah, Microsoft are already running like literal billions of calls and meetings on that platform across Teams Consumer and what was Skype, now all Teams Consumer. So like it's a well-trodden platform and huge investments there to make sure that platform is scalable, robust, supportable.
Let's touch on that a little bit. So we dug into the architecture and like the functionality of it. What are the overlapping benefits then of Teams Phone Extensibility built into ACS, Azure Communication Services? So for a contact center, specifically in terms of like reliability, be able to scale, ease of deployment, what does that actually mean?
You just listed them all, Josh. Those are the benefits. Yeah, I mean it's the same platform, so that's the big thing. Is you're running on the platform you've already bet your business on for Teams. So I'd say that's a big one. I'd say another big benefit is just Microsoft are continuing to invest huge amounts of money and brain power into the platform. Actually, Gidi mentioned IC3, which is Microsoft is call it the Intelligent Conversation and Communications Cloud, that group. And I think that's timely for this conversation because obviously there's an immense amount of investment going into AI, speech rec, multimodal models, all that good stuff. Solutions that go down the Teams Phone Extensibility / Unify route get to leverage all that investment now and into the future. And that's the thing that's super exciting for me is Microsoft are literally spending billions on different models and technology and training, and these solutions will get to leverage that and make that into customer facing solutions to meet the business requirements.
Absolutely, Tom. I like to look at it as I think you're already maybe a bit familiar with a theme that we love talking about here on the show, which is I like to call it features versus experience, and how feature comparisons are not even a thing these days. It's 2025. Everything is so commoditized. If we tried to map features, I'm not sure how much value that would have given us, but I think the things that you said here are more related to the overall experience of the solution and how that experience improves when you work with Teams Phone Extensibility or Azure Communication Services. So as part of that, I can say easy onboarding is a big thing. Because things get so commoditized, you're starting to see more and more vendors, by the way, not only in CCaaS, but in contact center, but even more broadly in customer experience or even just tech in general, where you see new startups that have offerings that look seemingly awesome, but someone needs to know how to implement it, how to deliver it, how to onboard easily. So like a big part of Teams Phone Extensibility for me is Microsoft's vision in making adding a contact center to your to Teams. Microsoft's vision there is it will be as easy as doing it in a few clicks through the Teams admin center. So it starts from things like that. Then, just like you said, Microsoft is investing so much in AI and cognitive services and Gen AI and whatnot. But then, as of today, it's a bit of a jungle. It's a bit unstructured in the sense that it was left for the ISV to figure out how they want to do it, how exactly they want to leverage speech to text, how exactly they want to leverage text to speech, how they want to leverage Azure OpenAI, and so on. And now with Teams Phone Extensibility, there's more of a standardized way of like Microsoft telling you, here's how you're going to do it. And for the buyer, it means that hopefully they still trust the vendor that they buy the solution from, but they know that Microsoft got their back in terms of we've made sure that this vendor is following our best practices, our guidelines on how to make AI work in the best way possible. And then lastly, it's of course the reliability. That never changed. And we believe that will also never change in the future, where before everything, with respect to AI, with respect to easy onboarding and all this stuff, it needs to be up and running. The thing needs to be up and running. You need to have an agent that's live, that's ready to receive a call. That's the bread and butter, the fundamental of any contact center solution. And what Azure Communication Services gives you in that sense is just inheriting the native 5 nines reliability or uptime for voice. The Teams Phone already has. Teams Phone, Microsoft announced 5 nines for Teams Phone already in Enterprise Connect 2024. And now it's becoming official for contact centers as well, which for us is really exciting to be able to come to a potential buyer and say, we can guarantee a 5 nines uptime for voice, is something that really resonates with buyers out there that understand the never ending significance of staying up and running.
Tom, so many businesses are looking to integrate Microsoft Teams and Contact Center. How can Teams Phone Extensibility and the Unify integration model support the consolidation of that UC in Contact Center?
Actually, if you look at the Teams and Teams Phone market, like most people have done their kind of phone voice first and contact center comes second. And actually, the vast majority of contact center is still on-prem. And I've seen in the last kind of 24 months, very much spurred on by the AI conversation. Oh, we need to move to cloud now for contact center to take advantage of these new capabilities. So I'm seeing a lot of customers that went Teams Phone now looking at it. And the thing that Unify/Teams Phone Extensibility brings to the table that really helps that is it makes it a much easier deployment. As Gidi said, if you've already got Teams Phone, you've already got phone numbers running in, you can jump on with a solution like AudioCodes and literally within hours have running Teams phone numbers, phone coming through and routing. So from a project point of view, the infrastructure stuff is much easier than it was before. there's still work to be done to work out how you want to use it in the business, routing, business value, all that good stuff. So I don't want to underestimate the project value, but in terms of actually getting going, and it's a fantastic opportunity to get going with a single country or business unit or group. Often I see customers who have contact center trying to solve the entire problem of contact center globally, but actually the win very often is pick a business unit, a problem, and solve it. And I think that's where Teams Phone Extensibility Unify helps, is you can scope a relatively short project with a relatively specific business case and get on that journey and run the two in parallel for a while, and then move over as you see fit, as you grow confidence, as you take advantage of those new abilities.
I can second what Tom is saying about, we're also seeing, enterprises that, they've had enough of a legacy contact center solution, but then, it's kind of, they waited, and then they kind of would like at least to migrate all at once, which is a bit, which, can be a challenge, to be gentle. And I agree that when we talk about Teams phone extensibility, the the connection, the the more intimate connection to Teams, I should say, allows you to, okay, maybe I migrated, let's say I have, I don't know, 80,000 Teams users on my Teams tenant. With Teams phone extensibility and how it's going to be delivered through Teams Admin Center eventually, I will be able to say, okay, I have all these tens of thousands of users, but I'm gonna start with, this and that site, which is only a small subset of that group. Start with that, roll it out very easily, see everything is good there, handle the onboarding, move on to the next ones, and everything stays part of the same kind of evolving ecosystem that you're growing there. So
Another question for you here, sir. For organizations that are considering Unify-certified contact center in Microsoft Teams, what are some of the key factors that they should keep in mind when deciding?
yeah, and I think we have a bit of a privilege when we get to answer that question, in the sense that, you know, yes, Unify certification is a new thing. Teams phone extensibility is a new thing, but the actual components of it, the elements that make up for it, are not new, and it's namely not new for us here at AudioCodes and at Invoca. So it's pretty cool, and it's pretty exciting to see a technology choice that we've made here, more than 2 years back, becoming the new industry kind of highest standard. I remember back then in the days when we just started to work with ACS, we had partners coming to us and be like, really, like, are you able to do this? There are gaps, there are some gaps, technical gaps, and so on. Are you able to cope with it? And I think that's where we did a pretty cool job at kind of bringing what we like to call the kind of our engineering DNA, if you will. We have a lot of good engineering brains here at AudioCodes, and people who are not afraid to touch new things and solve problems on their own without necessarily having the perfect solution ready on the shelf from Microsoft. That all that allowed us to bring that technology stack, the Azure Communication Services technology stack, to enterprises in production for more than 2 years now. So I'd say we learned quite a lot.
And that's a big thing, Gidi. Like you've, I'm fortunate to talk to a lot of the different solution providers and a lot of enterprise customers. And you're one that has customers in production who are very happy with the solution. We've had some of them on the podcast and stuff in the past. And like everybody else is in a development cycle, you started very early on this journey. So you've got a lot of experience of actual ACS and now what is Unify in the wild in production.
Yeah, exactly. So in the beginning, like anything, like any new challenge, in the beginning we were sweating and working to close gaps and solve them on our own. But now when that's done, we get to just be there, gain experience, and do a better job when we need to deliver that to our customers. I think one thing that really helps us there, and to answer your question, Josh, on like key factors to look at when making that choice. And I'm seeing more and more of that as time goes by, is that combination between being a vendor to also being the implementation and support or delivery partner of the solution. So you do have quite a few solutions out there where someone is the vendor and someone else is implementing and supporting the solution. And what we are seeing in the field, when we talk with buyers, when we look at industry surveys and so on, it's very clear that buyers would, if you ask them, who would you prefer to do the implementation for you, they would always prefer that the vendor does it if they're able to. And I think that's where we are also enjoying an advantage that we've acquired with time in being able to leverage and harness our global professional services arm. I mean, we have hundreds of professional services engineers spread worldwide that come in house. They know Voca. I mean, they're integral part of AudioCodes, and so it allows us to do a much better job when it comes to delivery. So I can say delivery is definitely a very important factor. And maybe another one, and I can go on forever, but I'll end with that.
Mhm.
Is kind of thinking what makes the solution future ready. I don't want to say future proof, because in 2025 I don't know what future proof means.
just
But
means adding new features every week, I think.
yeah, exactly. But when we talk about being future ready, I'm thinking of things like, when we look at what's happening in the AI space, right? And it's only the beginning of that journey of the industry. We're already seeing very strong signs of of a pretty intense fragmentation of the space. So you got different AI offerings, different AI-based solutions that each of them has its own domain speciality, vertical speciality, and so on. We believe that in the future, an enterprise could well have tens, if not even hundreds, of different AI solutions, bots, agents, however you want to name it. And so I think one very important thing to consider is, can the CCAS that I'm considering, okay, great, it's on Teams Phone Extensibility, all the good stuff we've been mentioning here, but can it act as some kind of a vehicle that can centralize the different AI solutions that I'm going to have, and the list is only going to grow? Can the solution I'm looking at do a good job at centralizing all these solutions and delivering them to my calling customers, to my digital experience customers, on web chat or social media and so on? Can those AI solutions be streamlined through the CCAS application to those, to my customer base?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, there's because if we're saying you're choosing between Unify solutions, then everybody has access to the same fundamental technology on Microsoft, but it's the different solutions will choose to pick pieces of that to be faster or slower to create business aligned solutions to it. And yeah, if I was suggesting how people choose, definitely having a conversation about what's your vision for where this is going, what's your roadmap around AI, what else are you doing with AI beyond the contact center conversation. That's a really good point, because you're buying into hopefully a multi-year business partnership with very often the piece of technology that is integrating and interacting with your end customers. So it's a really important decision. The other thing I would add for customers listening in is it's now cloud, right? So it shouldn't be, oh, you can't try this out, we need a big project to set it up. Actually, you should be able to get hands-on with this stuff relatively
Oh yes.
easily. So that's a good one for a test. Like, well, can we, spin something up and try it out? And that's a good test of, is it really cloud scale ready to go, and a great way to get hands-on experience with that solution.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more, Tom. I mean, it's 2025, and it only makes sense that if you're going to make such a massive investment, I'm not even talking about budget. I'm talking about the migration effort, the onboarding effort. You might as well try it hands-on, really see that it fits
Yeah.
you. And the good news are there are a bunch of solutions out there, including ours, but we're not the only ones, who do offer a completely online POC experience free of charge. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
love that. That shows a level of confidence in the product to be like, look, you get it into your hands and we trust you'll have a good experience.
absolutely.
For sure. Gentlemen, this was really good, really insightful. I know on our end, we've received lots of questions around, all right, Teams phone extensibility, Unify integration model. All right, how's that all tie into Azure Communication Services? There's a lot of things on the technical end that people had questions about, and that's obviously what we wanted to cover here. So Tom and Gidi, thank you so much for coming on the show and helping to explain it to us a little bit. For everyone listening, hopefully you got some value out of this and came away with a clear vision of what is the difference between each of them. But thank you all for coming on the show and for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Always on CXCX. If you learned one thing from this episode, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're using Microsoft Teams and are looking to integrate a contact center, consider trying Voca for free for 30 days. Voca is built on Microsoft Azure, meaning your customer interactions start, stay, and end with the same reliability and 5.9 uptime as Microsoft Teams. Just Google AudioCodes Voca or find the link in the show notes. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of Always on CXCX. We'll see you in the next one.